A bond was supposed to be the one truth no crowd could rewrite, the one law older than rank, inheritance, and fear. Ophelia Nightshade had been raised on that promise the way other daughters were raised on lullabies. If the moon marked you, you belonged. If the bond answered, no elder could silence it. Yet beneath the torchlight of Nightshade Hold, with 6 allied packs watching from carved stone galleries, she learned that old truths were only as strong as the people willing to defend them, and people who feared scandal more than dishonor could turn sacred ritual into theater in a single breath. The marriage altar stood on a raised black platform veined with silver ore, ringed by winter ivy and white candles that hissed each time mountain wind cut through the open arches. Ophelia's veil had been fastened with her grandmother's moonpins, her wrists painted in ash milk spirals, her pulse too fast beneath lace cuffs she had stitched herself because no seamstress in the hold would touch a bride already whispered about. Bondless, they had called her for months, smiling when they said it, as though naming a weather pattern. Her groom, Ryland Darkwater, did not take her hand when the officiant invited first contact. He stood 1 pace away in ceremonial black, jaw tight, eyes fixed above her head as if she were a servant waiting to be dismissed. The silence lengthened. Then he turned to the assembly instead of her. "I refuse this union," he said, each word carrying cleanly under the vaulted ceiling. "She has no living bond signature. I will not yoke my line to a hollow vessel." The officiant faltered. "You were vetted by both councils. This is the lunar rite." Ryland's mother rose from the front bench in iron gray velvet, the nightshade crest at her throat. "Then let the rite confirm what we already know. She is bondless. Strip the vows." A murmur rolled through the gathered packs, not shocked so much as relieved to witness what they had already decided privately. Ophelia heard her own breathing, thin and ragged in the cold. She looked toward her father. He never stood. He kept his gaze on the lineage ledger lying open beside the officiant, fingers pressed flat to the page where her name had been inked that morning. "Father," she said. Her voice cracked on the single word. He spoke without looking up. "Do not make this uglier than it already is." The officiant asked for a challenge, because ritual required the invitation even when Mercy had left the room. No one challenged. Not a cousin. Not a guard she had treated for fever last winter. Not the kitchen matron whose son she had sat with through shift sickness. Candles spit and bent in the draft. Rylan exhaled with visible relief, then stepped down from the altar as if dismounting from an unpleasant chore. Ryland's mother crossed the platform herself. Ophelia smelled snowflower perfume and old resentment before she felt the woman's hand at her veil. The fabric tore at the temple pins, one scraping her skin hard enough to sting. Lace fell around her feet like shed skin. "Look at her," the older woman said to the assembly. "No blessing mark, no answering pulse. She would have poisoned our line with emptiness." Ophelia's hands trembled so badly she had to clasp them to keep from shaking apart in front of everyone. "The bond has always been late in my family line," she said, forcing each word through a narrowing throat. "Grandmother's records say—" "Your grandmother is dead," her father said, finally meeting her eyes, "and her records are not law." By the time the bells marked the half-hour, the scribe had drawn a hard black line through Ophelia Nightshade on the lineage roll and sanded the wet ink as if burying a body. Her ceremonial cloak was removed. Her crest ring was demanded. When she hesitated, 2 wardens closed in, not striking her, only crowding close enough that she could feel the metal chill of their gauntlets through her sleeves. "I invoke Winter Sanctuary," she said, louder now, turning toward the officiant. "You cannot cast a blooded wolf unprotected in storm season. It is old hold law." "Not for the exiled," her father answered. That was the first lie. Winter law did not exempt the exiled. Everyone there knew it. The second lie came from Rylan, who paused at the base of the platform and spoke with a calm she had once mistaken for steadiness. I kept my word longer than I should have. That is all anyone owes her. By midnight, sleet had begun to rattle against the outer battlements, and the courtyard stones shone black under torchlight. They did not walk her through the family gate. They used the trade arch, the one for debtors and disgraced petitioners. The wardens removed the white ribbon from her braid, cut away the moon thread bracelet that marked her betrothal, and tied her wrists with ceremonial cord not tight enough to bruise, just tight enough to humiliate. At the threshold, the steward read the sentence in a bored voice: name struck, dowry forfeit, border rights revoked, return punishable under Pact Defense Statute. Ophelia stood with sleet melting down her neck and tasted iron where she had bitten her lip raw. In her mind, everything narrowed to a hard, bright present. I am still breathing. I am still standing. My name is still mine, even if they scrape it from leather. I am not what they called me in that hall. I am not empty. I am not an error in their record book. The gate is opening and I have no cloak, no escort, no den right, no proof beyond my own pulse that I was born to this mountain. If I kneel now, they will remember me kneeling. If I beg now, they will call the begging my true face. Keep your spine straight. Keep your teeth together. Walk, and do not give them the sound of you breaking. When the gate groaned open, cold rain knifed through her thin ceremony dress. Someone in the shadowed guard line laughed under his breath. Another voice, lower, said, "She will not make dawn." Ophelia stepped across the boundary marker anyway. She might still have lingered near the lower path, hoping a sympathetic tracker would take pity and direct her to a safe outpost, if she had not heard Ryland's mother speaking just inside the gate as it closed. "Post riders to the neighboring holds," the woman said. "No shelter under our sign. Let her learn what bondless means." No shelter. Not merely expelled, erased. That was the breaking point. Ophelia turned from the border road and started down the shale descent toward the old charcoal trail, skirts soaked to the knee, slippers ruined in the first 10 strides. The mountain breathed cold around her, wet pine and stone dust and runoff from higher ice. Every branch looked like a reaching hand in torchless dark. She tore the hem of her dress to free her legs and ran until her chest burned. At the first switchback, she slipped, slammed to one knee, and had to grip a root to keep from sliding into the ravine. Pain flared up her shin, sharp but bearable. She pushed up, breath shaking, and listened. Behind her, high above, horns sounded once from Nightshade Hold, then twice. Not alarm, notification, border expulsion registered. She knew one law they could not erase from her memory: Crown Pack Winter Sanctuary. Any wolf, any bloodline, any status could petition the Alpha King's fortress for temporary protection between first frost and thaw. The law had survived 3 successions and 1 border war because it was tied to Oathstone, not preference. Petitioners could be judged later. They could not be turned away at the gate. The Royal Mountain Fortress lay east, farther than she had ever traveled alone. The main road would be watched by dawn. She cut through hunter paths instead, guided by river sound and the pale stripe of cloud where the moon tried to break through storm cover. Brambles snared her sleeves. Once she startled a stag and nearly screamed at the crash of antlers through brush. She kept moving. 3 hours into the descent, rain thinned to mist. Her fingers had gone numb. She found a fallen branch, stripped it to a rough staff, and crossed a torrent on slick stones 1 careful step at a time. On the far bank, she retched from cold and exhaustion, then wiped her mouth and rose again. Toward dawn, she reached the abandoned watch shrine at Split Rock, its roof half collapsed, moon icon worn smooth by decades of weather. She ducked inside long enough to bind her ankle with torn lace and count what remained. 1 hairpin, a small flint wrapped in cloth, and the thin silver chain she had hidden under her bodice since childhood, stamped with the old nightshade wolf before politics changed the crest. The chain bit cold into her palm. "If I get there," she whispered into the dark voice frayed, "I ask for law, not mercy." The sky lightened from black to iron gray. Ravens began calling from the cliffs. Ophelia left the shrine and climbed the eastern ridge path, each step a negotiation between pain and will, until at last she saw them through the mist. The outer towers of the Crown Pack fortress, carved straight from mountain stone, banners dark with rain, gate fires burning even in daylight. Relief hit so hard it almost folded her. She made it to the lower approach before the gate guards crossed halberds and demanded name and purpose. Her tongue felt swollen, slow. "Ophelia Nightshade," she managed, "exiled, petitioning Winter Sanctuary under Crown Pack law." One guard stared at her torn dress and bare shoulders. The other signaled upward toward the wall walk. Runners moved. Horns answered from inside, short and clipped. "Process," she told herself. "Procedure. This is not refusal." Then a captain in royal black descended the steps with 4 soldiers at his back, took one look at her face, and said, "By order of the throne, all unsworn entrants are to be detained and presented for direct judgment." Ophelia swayed where she stood, rainwater dripping from her hair to stone. "Detained," she repeated, not trusting her balance, only the word. The captain's expression did not soften. "You will come before Alpha King Magnus Wildfire now." The word landed like a chain around her ribs, but Ophelia lifted her chin anyway and said, "Then take me to him under sanctuary petition." The captain gave a short nod that was almost respect, and gestured for 2 soldiers to flank her. No one touched her. That restraint should have comforted her, yet the careful distance felt like another verdict, as if she were already a problem to be contained rather than a wolf requesting law. The halberds rose, the gate groaned inward, and she crossed from open mountain into the Crown Pack's lower ward, with rain still running from her hair and ceremony ash drying in pale cracks along her wrists. Inside, the fortress did not resemble Nightshade Hold's carved vanity. It was functional stone layered by generations who expected war and winter more often than celebration. Smoke from forged chimneys drifted low and metallic. Courtyards stepped upward in angular terraces linked by steep stairs, each landing lit by iron braziers that turned the wet flagstones bronze. She smelled oiled leather, damp wool, ash, and the dense feral note of many wolves living in one enclosed place. Everywhere, movement. Runners carrying scroll tubes, healers in dark blue hauling baskets of dried herbs, warriors drilling with blunt spears despite the rain. No one stopped to stare for long, but she felt glances hit her and move on. Quick appraisals filed away for later gossip. By the time they reached the inner arch, her injured ankle had stiffened so badly she could not hide the limp. A gray-haired woman in healer bands stepped from a side corridor, eyes narrowing at Ophelia's soaked dress and bruised knee. "She needs warmth and broth first." "She needs judgment first," the captain answered. The healer looked as if she wanted to argue, then caught herself, gaze flicking to Ophelia's face. "Hold your weight to the outside of your foot," she said quietly, "or you will tear the tendon before nightfall." It was the first kindness she had been offered since the altar, and the simplicity of it nearly undid her. She swallowed, nodded once, and kept moving. They climbed through a vaulted hall lined with old battle standards and entered the king's court from a side passage rather than the main doors. The chamber opened wide and high beneath a ribbed ceiling blackened by centuries of firelight. At the far end, the throne dais rose 3 steps above the floor, carved from a single slab of dark stone veined with copper. Wolves were etched along its base, not decorative but watchful, each with bared teeth and lowered heads like guardians at an unseen grave. Nobles clustered in speaking knots along the side aisles, silver and fur and polished boots. Their conversations thinned as she was let in. Some faces held open curiosity, others calculation, others blunt contempt. She recognized too well. Near the throne stood a woman in court silver with a high jeweled collar and a smile too composed to be sincere. Guinevere Stoneheart. If rumors from border caravans were true, her posture implied ownership of the room before any crown had granted it. The captain stopped at the center mark in the floor, struck his fist to his chest, and announced, "Unsworn entrant, Ophelia Nightshade, exiled from Nightshade Hold, petitions Winter Sanctuary under Crown Pack law." A murmur moved through the chamber at her surname. The woman in silver tilted her head, eyes sharpening with predatory delight. Then Ophelia looked at the throne. Magnus Wildfire did not need ceremony to declare himself. He sat slightly forward, forearms braced on his knees as if stillness cost him effort. Broad shoulders under a plain black tunic, no jeweled mantle, no ornamental chains. A narrow scar cut through one eyebrow. His hair was dark, tied back at the nape with leather. He looked less like a monarch posed for portraiture and more like a war captain interrupted mid-campaign. But it was his attention that struck hardest, a directness so complete she felt it like a physical pressure against her sternum. He studied her without haste. Not her torn hem, not the mud on her calves. Her. Ophelia had prepared herself for cruelty, for spectacle, for a man who enjoyed fear. What she found instead was restraint held at extreme tension, like a blade kept sheathed by force of will. The silver-clad woman stepped forward before he spoke. "Your Majesty, Nightshade sends refuse now?" She was rejected publicly for bond fraud. Their own altar refused her. We should not contaminate crown law for provincial scandals. Guinevere's voice was musical and sharpened. Several nobles nodded, relieved someone had voiced the contempt they preferred to imply. Ophelia forced her feet steady. "I invoke sanctuary by Oathstone right. Exile does not void winter law." "It can," Guinevere said, "when deception threatens pack stability." Magnus finally rose. The room quieted at once, like flame pinched between fingers. He descended one step from the dais, then another, stopping level with her but still several paces away. Up close, the scent of cedar smoke and storm rain reached her, startlingly distinct beneath court incense. Her pulse jumped for reasons she did not trust. "Who verified the rejection claim?" he asked, gaze still on Ophelia. The captain answered, "Nightshade efficient record carried by Hawk an hour before dawn, sire. Statement cites absent bond signature." "Absent," Magnus repeated, and there was weight in the single word. "Not false." Guinevere smiled without warmth. "Surely we are not debating semantics when six packs witnessed her humiliation." Magnus turned his head then, slow and precise. "In this hall, we debate law, not humiliation." Color touched Guinevere's cheeks, quickly hidden. He faced Ophelia again. "Can you stand through a formal test?" The question startled her. Not can you prove yourself? Can you stand? As though her body mattered as much as her testimony. "I can," she said, though her vision had begun to spark at the edges. A flicker crossed his expression, reading the lie and choosing not to expose it. "Then you will be tested under Crown Witness in the Moon Vault. If you are what you claim, sanctuary holds. If you are not, sentence will follow." Guinevere stepped closer to the dais rail, voice brightening with anticipation. "Use the ancient bond seal, sire. Let relic law settle this cleanly. If she is truly bondless, the seal will remain shut." At those words, several elders shifted uneasily. One old male in blue-trimmed robes muttered, "The seal has not answered in generations." Magnus's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, Ophelia thought he would refuse. Instead, he said, Prepare the vault. Within the quarter hour, as torchlight deepened toward early evening, they took her below the fortress through descending corridors cut into raw mountain. The air cooled with each level, damp and mineral-rich, carrying the faint metallic tang of old magic. Guards preceded and followed, boot steps synchronized. Nobles came too, drawn by the scent of spectacle. Guinevere glided near the front, silver skirts whispering against stone. Ophelia's ankle buckled once on the final stairs. A hand shot out and caught her elbow before she fell. Magnus. His grip was warm, firm, immediately gone. "Do not collapse in a vault built for echoes," he said quietly, near enough that only she could hear. "They repeat weakness for years." It was not gentle, yet it was not mockery. Instruction almost. She straightened, breath unsteady. By the time they entered the moon vault, night had fully settled over the mountain, and the chamber's ceiling oculus admitted a single column of pale light that struck the center dais like a blade. The ancient bond seal waited there, a slab of black obsidian set into the floor, etched with runes so old their lines seemed half fossil, half flame. Cold bled from it in waves. Around the perimeter stood 12 witness posts, each occupied by an elder or ranking officer. The master sealkeeper raised a staff and recited procedure. Petitioner will place dominant palm upon the seal at command. Recognized counterpart, if present, will answer by name. Should no bond exist, stone remains inert. Inert. The word tasted like grave dust. Ophelia stepped into the moonlight circle. Her wet dress clung to her spine. Her hand hovered over obsidian and shook hard enough for everyone to see. "I should not have come this far to be broken again. I should not have believed law could outlive politics. If it remains silent, they will call the silence proof. They will say the mountain itself rejected me. Breathe. Just breathe. I have survived shame already. I can survive one more verdict." But she knew that was a lie. This one would go deeper, because this time she had hoped. "Begin," Magnus ordered. She set her palm on the seal. Nothing. No warmth. No pulse. Only stone cold enough to ache through bone. A rustle moved around the chamber, soft and hungry. Guinevere exhaled audibly, triumphant. As expected. The master sealkeeper frowned, checked his runic tablet, and repeated louder. "Recognized counterpart, if present. Answer by name." Still nothing. Ophelia's throat tightened. Heat gathered behind her eyes, humiliating and unstoppable. She would not cry in front of them. Not again. She locked her jaw, stared at the runes, and felt the old numbness rising, the one that came when pain exceeded language. Then Magnus spoke. "Ophelia." Her name in his voice was low, rough, unadorned, and the chamber changed. A bright current tore through her ribs, violent and precise, as if a second heartbeat had forced itself awake beneath her breastbone. She gasped and doubled, hand still pinned to obsidian by some force she could not name. The seal flared from black to argent, rune lines igniting one by one in widening rings. Across the dais, Magnus inhaled sharply, the sound raw enough to silence every witness. Amber bled into his irises until almost no human color remained. His pupils narrowed. Something ancient looked out through his eyes, not cruelty, not conquest, but stunned recognition. Storm rain and cedar smoke flooded her senses, though no storm reached this depth of stone. A thread of light, gold shot through with silver, snapped taut from her sternum toward him, visible for one impossible heartbeat before sinking beneath skin. Awareness prickled along her spine so fiercely she trembled. The animal part of her went rigid, alert, reaching. Fear slammed into wonder, wonder into grief, grief into a hunger she did not understand. "No," Guinevere whispered, then louder. "No, the sequence is compromised. Stop this." No one moved. Ophelia lifted her head, tears finally spilling unchecked, and found Magnus already looking at her as if the rest of the chamber had fallen away. The pull between them tightened, undeniable, terrifying in its certainty. She had been discarded that morning as less than nothing, and now the most feared male in the mountain stood visibly shaken because she existed. His voice came again, lower, almost reverent. "Say my name." Every instinct told her to run from that command, from all the ways power could twist devotion into another cage. Yet beneath the fear, the tight knot behind her ribs loosened for the first time in years. "Magnus," she said. The seal answered with a thundercrack of light, and they stared at each other in locked, breathless recognition. The blast threw sound against stone hard enough to rattle dust from the vault's ceiling. Ophelia's knees gave out. She did not remember falling, only the sensation of heat racing through her veins in brutal waves, then Magnus's arms around her as the world tilted and narrowed to the scent of rain, cedar, and iron. Voices rose around them, fractured and urgent. "The seal has never done that. She is unstable. Restrain her. Your Majesty, protocol requires immediate council custody." Magnus did not look up from her face. "Protocol can wait." Guinevere stepped forward, silver skirts whispering over stone. "A bond flare does not erase risk. She should be examined in public ward, under witness." "No." The word came from him like a locked gate slamming shut. He turned to the master sealkeeper. "Record the seal's response. Lock the vault. No one alters a single rune until I order it." Ophelia tried to speak and choked on heat. Her skin felt too tight for her bones. The marks painted on her wrists earlier in the night now glimmered faintly, as if moonlight had seeped beneath her skin and could not decide whether to burn or heal. She reached blindly for balance and found the front of Magnus's tunic clenched in her fist. He adjusted his hold, one arm beneath her knees, one bracing her back. "Stay with me." She hated that she obeyed. He carried her out of the vault through the same carved corridors, but everything had changed. Officers flattened themselves against walls to make space. Elders who had argued minutes earlier lowered their eyes and stepped aside. The bond thread she had seen in the chamber was no longer visible, yet she could feel its pull, sternum to sternum, a low thrum that rose whenever he shifted her closer against the cold. At the upper landing, a team of attendants waited with blankets and a wheeled litter. Magnus passed them without slowing. "Sire," one healer protested, hurrying at his shoulder. "She is fevering. I need access now." "You will have it where I choose." The private infirmary lay behind two iron-bound doors off the king's residential corridor, not the public healing hall near the barracks. Ophelia noticed because she had never heard of it. The chamber was spare, warm, and severe. One narrow bed, one long table of herbs and glass, a copper basin steaming near the hearth, and no gallery windows for spectators. Thick wool screens blocked every line of sight from the hallway. Magnus set her down with careful precision and turned as attendants crowded in with cloths, tinctures, and questions. "Out," he said. A stunned pause. The gray-haired healer from the gate, the one who had advised her ankle, held her ground. "If her heart seizes during a bond burn, your command pride will not revive her." Something feral sharpened in his gaze, then eased by visible effort. "You may leave what is needed. You may tell me dosages. Then you leave." The healer studied him for a long beat and seemed to decide that this was as much concession as the mountain would get tonight. She set jars in a row on the table, named each with clipped efficiency, and pointed at a carved line on a ceramic cup. "Willow bark for pain to this mark. Fever leaf in quarter pinches. Cool cloths every few minutes until her pulse settles. If she stops answering, send for me and I will ignore whatever order you give." A corner of Magnus's mouth moved, not quite a smile. "Noted. When the doors shut behind the last attendant, the room quieted enough for Ophelia to hear the storm beginning again outside, rain tapping the high stone like fingers on a drum. Magnus knelt by the basin, soaked linen cloth in water, wrung it out, and laid it against her throat. She flinched. He withdrew his hand at once. "Tell me where to touch, and where not to." Confusion cut through fever. "You are asking?" "Yes." She stared at him, searching for mockery and finding none. He was the Alpha King. She had seen wolves shake at his voice in the court. He could have claimed necessity, law, rank, instinct, any weapon men used when they wanted access without consent. Instead, he waited, still and watchful, cloth cooling in his open palm. "Neck," she whispered. "Wrists, not my face." He nodded once and resumed, each movement precise. Cloth at throat, cloth at pulse point. A pause for her breath to settle. He administered bitter tincture and held the cup only after she reached for it. When she trembled too hard to keep it steady, he steadied the bottom, not her hand. Minutes or hours blurred. The fever climbed, broke, climbed again. At one point the bond pulled so sharply she gasped and curled inward, claws threatening through her fingertips. Magnus sat back and read from a leather-bound law volume he had pulled from a shelf near the hearth, his voice low and even as rain. Crown Pack Sanctuary Statute Winter Clause 7. Any petitioner under First Frost protection shall retain bodily sovereignty until judgment and oath. No touching, claiming, interrogation, or confinement beyond immediate medical necessity without explicit consent, witnessed or recorded. He turned a page. Clause 8. Recognition events, including bond flare, do not suspend Clause 7. Another page. Clause 9. Any officer, noble, elder, or alpha who violates these clauses commits oath breach against the crown itself. She listened through the haze, tears leaking sideways into her hair because she had never heard any male in power read a law as if it might protect her. Laws had always been recited at her, over her, around her. Never to her. At some point, she slept. At some point, she woke to dark and thought she was back at the altar, wrists bound, veil torn, voices laughing. Panic ripped through her before thought formed. She swung hard, clawed hand striking Magnus across the shoulder where he sat beside the bed. He did not pin her. He did not bark an order. He stood, stepped back into the center of the room, and with deliberate calm pulled the collar of his tunic aside, baring his throat. "If you need to strike again, strike there," he said quietly. "Do it where it matters. Do not spend your fear on warning blows." She froze, chest heaving. He lowered himself to the floor then, not looming, not approaching, forearms resting loosely on his knees. "You woke in terror. I am not offended by survival." Ophelia's whole body shook. Heat pulsed beneath her skin, but a different tremor moved beneath it now, a destabilizing ache that felt dangerously like relief. Inside her, thought came in raw, present tense, stripped to bone. I am waiting for the turn. I am waiting for the price hidden beneath kindness, because there is always a price. I know this script. Protection becomes leverage. Patience becomes debt. Gentle hands close into a fist when the door locks. If I sleep, I wake owned. If I trust, I bleed for it. He sits on the stone floor like he has nowhere else to be. He gives me his throat like surrender and calls it choice. I do not know where to put that. I do not know what to do with a man who can overpower me and chooses not to. I do not know whether to run from this or fall toward it. Magnus broke the silence first, voice roughened by exhaustion. Power without gentleness is only another form of cowardice. No speech followed. No demand for gratitude. He remained where he was, several paces away, back against the wall beneath the dark window slit, until her breathing slowed and sleep took her again. By dawn, the rain had thinned to a pale mist along the inner courtyards, and the fever had dropped enough for Ophelia to stand without the room pitching sideways. She expected to be hidden. Instead, Magnus sent formal summons to First Court and had her escorted there in a clean wool dress and dark cloak lined with fortress blue, her injured ankle wrapped tight. The great hall felt colder in daylight than it had at night. All carved stone and hard edges, sunlight cutting through narrow, clear-story windows in long bars that made dust look like ash suspended in air. When she entered, the chamber reacted like a flock, startled by a predator. Conversations fractured, then reformed in sharper, meaner currents. Some nobles stared at the faint crescent glow now visible beneath her collarbone, where bond energy had marked her skin overnight. Others refused to look at all. Guinevere stood near the front ranks in court silver, expression controlled, as if she had practiced composure before a mirror. She dipped her head to Magnus and then fixed Ophelia with a smile polished thin. "With respect to the throne," she said, projecting to the galleries, "the petitioner remains unvetted. Until purity examinations are complete, she should be veiled and silent in formal assembly." An elder in blue joined in. "Agreed. Containment protocols exist for a reason. We cannot have unknown blood influence policy through spectacle." Another voice from the left aisle, male, contempt undisguised. "Nightshade's discarded bride stands in our court unbound to any pack oath. This is a security failure dressed as mercy." The words hit like stones, familiar and almost soothing in their predictability. Ophelia felt herself begin to retreat inside, old numbness assembling its walls. Magnus rose from the throne. He did not answer from above. He descended the dais and walked the length of the hall until he stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, close enough that the bond thread hummed warm through her chest. He faced the assembly, not her, his presence a wall at her right side. "Crown Pack law recognizes what the ancient seal confirmed under witness," he said. "Ophelia Nightshade is a bond partner to the Alpha Line." Silence dropped heavily across the chamber. He continued, voice carrying to the far gallery without effort. "By Crown statute, any insult, coercion, or public diminishment of a recognized bond partner constitutes treason adjacency against the throne's continuity." A sharp intake rippled through the nobles. Guinevere's composure fissured for a heartbeat. Magnus pointed to the center floor. "Those who spoke will kneel." No one moved. Then the captain from the gate stepped forward from the guard line and dropped to one knee. The sound of armor striking stone broke the paralysis. One by one, the elder, the left aisle noble, and 3 others followed, faces tight with outrage and fear. "Kneel fully," Magnus said. They complied. He turned his head slightly toward Ophelia, and when he spoke next, his tone shifted, still formal, but threaded with something that felt startlingly like trust. "Law grants redress to the wronged. You will hear each name and choose sentence." Her breath caught. "Me? You." The first kneeling noble was ordered to speak. "I am Lord Perrin Coldharbour." "Use her full name," Magnus said. Perrin swallowed. "I insulted Ophelia Nightshade." The next, voice shaking with fury. "Elder Tomas Ravenscar. I demanded Ophelia Nightshade be silenced." Each repeated it, full name, clear and unavoidable, until the hall itself seemed to absorb the sound and hold it. Magnus looked at her. "Fine, lash, censure, or forgiveness. Your judgment stands recorded." Power settled in her hands like an object she had never been permitted to touch. It frightened her more than cruelty had. Cruelty she understood. This required choice. She looked at the kneeling line, at Guinevere watching from the edge with narrowed eyes, at the scribes waiting with sharpened quills. Then she looked down at her own fingers, still faintly shaking. "I will not ask for lashes," she said, voice steadier than she felt. Not today. A few shoulders in the line loosened in relief. She lifted her gaze. Lord Perrin pays a winter grain levy to the sanctuary stores. Elder Tomas funds 3 healer apprentices from border packs he called tainted. The others pay fines scaled to rank, all to widow funds and gate relief. Murmurs spread, surprised and uneasy. Mercy would have been easy to dismiss as weakness. This was neither mercy nor vengeance. It was accounting. Magnus gave one short nod. So ordered. He faced the kneeling nobles again. You will deliver payment within 7 days. Fail, and the sentence converts to whipping under military code. They bowed their heads in rigid assent. As guards moved to escort them out for record signing, Ophelia felt the hall recalibrating around her in subtle increments. Not acceptance yet, but caution, where contempt had stood untouched minutes earlier. Guinevere turned away first, silver skirts snapping like a struck banner, and the look she sent Ophelia over her shoulder promised that this was not finished. Ophelia should have been terrified. She was, partly. But beneath the fear, another sensation took root, tentative and real. A wall she had not known she built beginning to crumble stone by stone. Magnus spoke without looking at her, gaze on the court. You did not choose the easy path. No, she said. At the edge of her vision, she saw his hand flex once at his side, then still. Good. For the first time since the altar, she believed that lowering her guard might not be the same thing as surrender. For the first time since the altar, she believed that lowering her guard might not be the same thing as surrender, and that belief frightened her almost as much as the bond itself. Court dissolved in uneasy clusters. Scribes hurried to duplicate the new penalties. Guards escorted kneeling nobles toward the record chambers, and the high galleries filled with low, urgent whispers that had the texture of dry leaves catching fire. Ophelia remained where she was until Magnus inclined his head toward a side corridor, a silent invitation to move, before the room decided she was spectacle again. They did not get far. Guinevere's voice, clear and controlled, carried from behind them. Your Majesty, a private word on alliance continuity. Magnus did not turn. Submit it in writing. It concerns your late father's campaign ledgers. That stopped him. Ophelia saw his shoulders lock, not in surprise but in recognition of an old wound touched with deliberate precision. He turned then, slowly. Guinevere stood in the center aisle beneath a shaft of winter light, her silver collar bright as a blade, one gloved hand resting on a lacquered scroll case. War debts are not court entertainment, Magnus said. They become court reality if rival pacts decide the crown has concealed insolvency, Guinevere answered. I am trying to prevent that. Her gaze slid to Ophelia, polite and poisonous. Stability matters, especially when relic events unsettle the old order. A primary lesson of humiliation Ophelia had learned was pattern recognition. Guinevere never attacked directly when a cleaner weapon existed. She used process, concern, duty, and left bloodless outcomes that still destroyed lives. The woman did not merely dislike her. She was constructing a framework in which Ophelia could be removed while everyone called it necessity. Magnus took one step down toward Guinevere. File your concern with the Treasurer and War Office. You do not brief me in corridors. Guinevere's smile remained. As you wish. I will include the correspondence from Nightshade, proving your new bond partner used seduction rights on my former mate last spring. I assume you will want the full set. The hall went still again. Ophelia felt the floor pitch for a heartbeat. That is a lie. Guinevere tilted her head. Then truth will survive review. She turned and walked away before anyone could challenge her further, leaving behind the faint scent of winter rose and the sensation of a trap springing somewhere out of sight. Magnus exhaled through his nose, sharp and contained. You are coming with me. He did not touch her, but the command carried protection rather than possession. They cut through service passages to a narrow council room above the inner armory, stone walls lined with maps and sealed document chests. The gray-haired healer from the gate was waiting there with a fresh wrap for Ophelia's ankle and the expression of someone who had already heard enough rumor to hate the day. "My name is Mara," she said while she knelt to retie the bandage. "If anyone tells you to drink something you did not watch being poured, you hand it to me first." Ophelia nodded. "Thank you." Mara glanced up, then to Magnus. "The lower ward is buzzing with purification talk. That word has teeth." "I know," Magnus said. By the second bell after court dismissed, 3 sealed packets had arrived at the council desk. One from Stoneheart territory requesting emergency review of bond legitimacy. One unsigned petition claiming the ancient seal had awakened under a cursed bloodline. And one transcript copy of supposed letters between Ophelia and an unnamed male promising influence through moonblood rites. The handwriting in the copies was elegant and wrong, too careful, as if it had been composed by someone who understood how noble men imagined guilty women writing. Magnus spread the pages on the map table while Ophelia stood opposite him, palms braced to keep them from shaking. "These are fabricated," she said. "I know." "Then why does it feel like she is already winning?" His eyes lifted to hers. "Because lies move faster than audits." He called for his war clerk, a compact woman named Sarah, with scarred knuckles and a precise memory, and dictated orders without raising his voice. "Dispatch riders to Nightshade Hold for original officiant records and witness seals. Send ravens to the Treasury Fortress at Cold Harbor for my father's debt ledgers. Full chain of custody. Summon the Master Sealkeeper and both deputies for immediate rune integrity check." Quietly. Sarah hesitated only once. If Lady Guinevere has already spoken to allied envoys, quiet may be gone. Then move faster. When she left, Magnus remained at the table, fingers flattened over forged pages as if pinning snakes. Ophelia watched him in profile and felt the paradox that had become her constant state. His presence eased the panic in her body even while the bond between them kept every nerve alert. She wanted distance and proximity in the same breath. She wanted to trust him without losing herself. Inside, thought came stripped and immediate. "I am standing in a king's war room with my ruined wedding still folded somewhere in a laundry basket, and men who never learn my voice now circulate letters about my body as if it were public evidence. I should be numb. I should be practical." Yet when he reads those pages, anger tight in his jaw, not because his reputation is threatened, but because I am slandered. A low thrum builds in my chest that feels dangerously like hope. Hope is not soft. Hope is exposure. If I lean into this bond and he chooses duty over me, I do not know if there is a second recovery inside me. But if I keep holding back, I stay in the old cage with the door open and call it safety. Magnus broke the silence. "Look at this." He slid one letter toward her and pointed to the wax crest impression. "Nightshade formal correspondence uses a split tail on the wolf sigil since the border reforms. This stamp has an unsplit tail. Old die. Could be stolen, but most likely recast from memory." Ophelia bent closer. "My grandmother kept one of the old dies in a cedar chest. It vanished after her funeral." "Who inherited her quarters?" "My father's sister. Then Ryland's mother managed household archives after the betrothal." Magnus's mouth hardened. Convenient. There was minimal space between them at the table now, heat radiating from his forearm near hers, the bond thread humming warm and steady. He shifted back first, as if he had felt the same current and chose restraint on principle. "Eat," he said, "then rest in the west solar. 2 guards outside, Maera inside. No one enters without your consent. And you?" "I will be in meetings until moonrise." The resulting tension sat between duty and intimacy, unresolved and alive. By evening, the fortress had changed texture. Servants lowered their voices when Ophelia passed. Two junior officers stopped talking altogether when she entered a stairwell. At supper, Mara intercepted a cup already poured and replaced it with one from a sealed jug, saying nothing, her jaw set hard. An hour later, Sarah returned with the first outcomes. Nightshade had refused immediate release of original altar records pending family dignity review. Cold Harbor Treasury acknowledged the Raven but said the Ledger Vault keybearer was traveling and could not open archives until his return in 3 days. The Master Sealkeeper came. One deputy did not. "Missing?" Magnus asked. Sarah nodded. "Left his quarters after court, not seen since." Non-trivial coincidences had begun to stack. Magnus issued another wave of orders, this time less quiet. Gate checks, messenger logs, interrogation holds for anyone leaving with seal room access. He looked like a male preparing for a siege inside his own walls. Near moonrise, a formal summons arrived for emergency council in the upper chamber, stamped with 3 elder seals and 1 Stoneheart countermark. Topic: Immediate stabilization measures to prevent Allied pack fracture after anomalous bond activation. Guinevere had moved from rumor to procedure in a single day. "You are not attending alone," Magnus told Ophelia. "I was not planning to." He held her gaze for a long beat. "If they demand purification rite language, you refuse everything until I am present." "I do not take vows under coercion." "Good." For one suspended second he looked as if he might reach for her hand. He did not. He stepped back, every line of him rigid with control, and went to the council chamber with 6 guards. She waited in the west solar with Mara and 2 sentries outside the door while storm clouds gathered over the mountain and the first hard rain struck the leaded glass. The minutes lengthened. Voices rose and fell in distant halls. Once, someone ran past the door at full speed. Less than a day had passed since the seal flared, and the fortress now felt like a throat holding back a shout. The strike came with paper and ceremony. A junior chamberlain arrived carrying a bronze tablet and an elder's white cord. He bowed too quickly and did not meet Ophelia's eyes. By emergency order of the council and under health authority, petitioner Ophelia Nightshade is to be escorted to the Moon Vault for provisional purification containment pending final ruling. The Alpha King is in debt review and cannot attend. Mara stepped between them. Health authority does not supersede Sanctuary Clause 7. The Chamberlain swallowed. Order bears 3 elder seals. "Show me." He offered the tablet. Mara scanned it, face going pale at the signatures. "These are real seals." Ophelia took the tablet and read the final line twice. "Refusal shall be treated as admission of taint and immediate threat to pack continuity." The crux of the scheme snapped into focus. Guinevere had built a legal corridor narrow enough that every branch punished Ophelia. Comply and enter a chamber already whispered as curse cleansing. Refuse and become public proof of guilt. "I want Magnus," Ophelia said. "He is in closed council," the Chamberlain replied. "No access." Mara leaned close, voice low. "We can barricade and force delay." Ophelia looked at the sealed order again, then at the sentries who had heard every word. Delay here would become resistance in record by midnight. Guinevere wanted spectacle. She also wanted Ophelia to appear afraid of process. "I will go," Ophelia said. "Under protest, you walk with me." Mara gave a sharp nod. "I do not leave your side." The corridor descent felt colder than before. Torches hissed. Guards changed at each landing, too many for a routine escort. At the final gate, Ophelia smelled the moon vault before she saw it. Wet stone, old iron, and a bitter resin smoke not used in ordinary rites. Inside, the witness posts were occupied, but not by the same balanced mix as the first test. More elders, fewer officers. Guinevere stood near the seal in dark ceremonial silver, hair braided high, expression solemn enough to pass for piety. "Thank you for cooperating," she said. Ophelia kept her voice level. Where is the Alpha King? In review. Duty is rarely convenient. Mara started forward. This proceeding is invalid without sovereign presence. An elder lifted his staff. Health provisional. Valid by majority. Guinevere gestured, and 2 attendants brought out restraint cords woven with runic thread, white against black stone. We will not harm you, she said softly. Containment only. If you are pure, the rite releases immediately. Ophelia's instincts sharpened to a fine, painful edge. She looked down at the seal and saw it then. One rune line near the northern quadrant had been recut, shallow but fresh, the groove still matte where ancient etching should have gleamed. Corrupted sequence. She lifted her head. Who altered the runes? No one answered. From somewhere above the vault door came the heavy boom of a crossbar dropping into place. Critical, her body understood before her mind caught up. The chamber had been prepared not to test her, but to trap her. And Magnus was not here. Guinevere watched recognition cross Ophelia's face and gave the smallest nod to the elders, as if confirming a prediction. Begin provisional rite. No, Mara snapped. She moved in front of Ophelia, healer's hands empty and steady. You cannot bind a sanctuary petitioner under falsified medical authority. The eldest counselor lifted his staff again, voice brittle with borrowed certainty. Stand down, healer. This is now a stability proceeding. Stability, Mara said, is not the same as cruelty dressed in law. 2 guards seized Mara by the arms before Ophelia could reach her. Mara fought with short, efficient strikes that would have dropped a lesser pair, but more soldiers closed in from the side aisles. They forced her back to a witness post and lashed her wrists to the iron ring there, not hard enough to injure, hard enough to silence. The first restraint cord came toward Ophelia. She stepped away and felt the outer runes hum beneath her bare soles through the thin leather of borrowed shoes. The altered groove in the northern quadrant gave off a faint resin sheen. Fresh, deliberate, deadly, if activated wrong. I said no, she repeated, louder. Guinevere folded her hands over her silver belt. Refusal is admission. You read the order. It was engineered. It was signed. Around the circle, elders began the purification litany in low unison, voices stacking into an oppressive rhythm that pressed against Ophelia's ribs. A second attendant reached for her shoulder. She twisted free, but the touch was enough. The corrupted line flashed dull red, and the whole chamber shuddered as if something deep in the mountain had turned in its sleep. A crack split one of the perimeter torches. Resin smoke thickened. The obsidian at center darkened past black, becoming a depth rather than a surface. Guinevere's composure sharpened with triumph. You feel that? The seal recognizes contamination. Ophelia met her gaze. It recognizes tampering. The elder with the staff barked, Bind her now! 2 more attendants advanced with runic cord. Ophelia backed toward the center glyph, breath fast, mind racing through law clauses, vault procedures, every detail Magnus and Sarah had put on the table. If they tied her at the boundary ring, the inverted sequence would pin her as a fault point, and the backlash would read as self-caused instability. Process would record her as dangerous. Guinevere would walk out carrying piety and precedent. Less than 2 minutes had passed since the bar dropped, and the chamber already felt like a verdict being carved in stone. From the high gallery door came pounding. A voice she recognized from the gate captain shouted, muffled by wood and iron, Open by royal command. Guinevere did not even glance up. Hold the bar! The attendants lunged. Ophelia ducked the first grab, took an elbow to her shoulder, staggered, and caught herself on the obsidian rim. Pain flared down her injured ankle. The second attendant looped cord around her forearm. The runes sewn into it burned cold. Mara shouted, raw with fury. Ophelia, center mark! Do not let them set you on the outer ring! Guinevere turned, Smile gone. Gag her. A cloth was forced over Mara's mouth. Ophelia ripped the cord free, skin scraping. The bond thrummed hard against her sternum, distant and urgent, as if Magnus were striking against stone somewhere beyond reach. Fear came clean and bright now, stripped of numbness. She had wanted him here. She still wanted him here. But the crux had become painfully clear. If she waited to be saved, Guinevere would define the story before he crossed the threshold. She stepped into the center glyph by choice. The chamber stilled in shocked confusion. Even the chanting faltered. Guinevere recovered first. Good. Spare us the theatrics. Kneel. Ophelia reached up with shaking fingers, pulled the last moonpin from her braid, and drove its sharpened end across her palm. Blood welled, vivid and immediate, and dripped onto the heart of the seal. Gasps broke around the ring. Record this, Ophelia said, voice carrying in a way it never had at Nightshade Hold. I enter under coercion, but I stand by will. I name what was done to me, rejected in ritual, stripped in public, cast from my gate under a false reading of law. I name my shame, and I return it to those who forged it. I claim sanctuary not as favor, but as right. The altered northern rune flared red again, then white, then a sickly violet. Guinevere hissed, "Trigger it." An elder slammed his staff butt against stone. The corrupted sequence fired. Agony hit like ice driven through bone. Light surged up Ophelia's arm, trying to split her open along old fractures of fear. She swayed but did not step off the glyph. She tasted copper, ash, stormwater. Inside her, thought stripped to present tense and command. Stay here. Stay in your body. They want panic because panic is easy to label. They want collapse because collapse can be archived as weakness. I am not a record they write without me. I am not the silence they trained. Pain is information. Breathe through it. Hold the center. Hold. The bond thread snapped into full force, gold laced with silver, stretching beyond walls and iron and politics. She threw her head back and shouted into the vault and through the mountain itself, "Magnus Wildfire, son of Calder, answer me!" The seal exploded. Silver fire tore outward in a ring, not heat but force, flinging attendants off their feet and knocking staffs from elder hands. The restraint cords in the attendant's grip ignited and fell as harmless ash. Every torch in the chamber blew out at once, replaced by the seal's own white radiance. On the vault walls, moving images burst into being like memory reflected on water. Guinevere in a side archive pressing coin bars across a ledger to the missing deputy seal keeper. Guinevere dictating the forged seduction letters, while a scribe scraped and rewrote Nightshade crests. Guinevere at the Elder Council table, sliding debt rumors and stabilizing marriage terms in the same breath. The scenes repeated from 3 angles, undeniable, and synchronized with identifiable witnesses. "No," Guinevere whispered, then screamed, "Shut it down!" The bar on the gallery door splintered. Guards flooded in with the gate captain, and behind them Magnus hit the floor of the vault at a run, eyes feral, power rolling off him like a storm front breaking. The corrupted mechanism discharged one final backlash toward him, a jagged arc aimed chest high. Ophelia saw it, felt it through the bond an instant before impact, and made her second choice without hesitation. She seized the thread with both hands in her mind and yanked, anchoring him to her center. The arc slammed into her channel first. White pain swallowed the room. She heard herself cry out, knees buckling, but Magnus was already there. One hand braced at her back, the other at her bloodied palm, grounding rather than taking control. "Easy," he said, voice rough and furious and terrified all at once. "I have you. Hold." "I am holding," she managed through clenched teeth. The light receded. The memory echoes remained, looping across stone while soldiers disarmed the elders and forced them to the perimeter. Guinevere stumbled backward toward the throne reliquary niche at the rear of the vault, where ceremonial blades were displayed for oath knights. Her face had gone pale beneath powder, but her eyes burned with naked hatred. She snatched the shortest dagger from the stand and lunged, skirts whipping, silver collar askew. "Love makes kings weak," she spat. "I should have ended this before the seal ever woke." Magnus pivoted to intercept, but Ophelia moved first. She raised her cut hand. The bond answered like a bell struck clean. White gold chains of light shot from the fractured seal, coiling around Guinevere's wrists, waist, and ankles mid-stride, locking her in place hard enough that the dagger clattered across stone. Guinevere fought, muscles straining, but each movement tightened the luminous links. Magnus kicked the dagger away and stepped in front of Ophelia, not blocking her from view, only shielding the line of attack. Guinevere bared her teeth. "You were discarded because you were nothing." Ophelia took one step forward, blood still dripping from her palm to the broken runes. Her voice did not shake. "I was discarded because you needed me voiceless. I choose my voice now." She turned to the assembled court, guards, elders, and witnesses pinned in the aftermath glow. "You saw the forged crests. You saw the bribes. Bring the seal keepers." The missing deputy was dragged in by two soldiers from the upper passage, wrists bound, face gray. He saw the wall echoes and sagged. "I altered the northern line," he choked out. "By Stoneheart order. Coin and passage were promised." The master seal keeper, shaking with rage, struck his chest in oath. "I testify the sequence was corrupted after first recognition, without sovereign order, without lawful cause." Sarah arrived breathless with document tubes under one arm and thrust a packet toward Magnus. "Intercepted courier from Stoneheart Wing. Original draft of the purification order. Her signet impression before elder counters." Magnus broke the seal, scanned once, then lifted his head. The chamber quieted to absolute stillness. "Guinevere Stoneheart," he said, each word carved. "By witnessed conspiracy against sanctuary law, forged correspondence, coercive misuse of elder seals, tampering with the ancient bond seal, and attempted assault under crown right, you are stripped of title and rank." Guinevere laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "You would fracture allied pacts for her?" "For law," Magnus said, "and for her. Both stand." He handed the intercepted order to Sarah and continued, voice carrying to every corner. "All Stoneheart estates held under Crown grant are dissolved. Liquid assets transferred to War Widow funds and Wintergate relief. You are sentenced to lifelong exile beyond all recognized pack borders under Oath brand. Any territory that shelters you forfeits treaty protection for 7 years." The sentence landed like thunder. Guinevere's shoulders finally dropped. Not in humility, in exhausted fury. "You think this ends with me? Fear will still choose tradition over your fragile reforms." Magnus's gaze did not waver. "Then we will outgovern fear." He nodded once to the captain. "Carry out sentence." Iron cuffs replaced light chains as soon as Ophelia lowered her hand. Guards took Guinevere by both arms and marched her toward the passage. She did not plead. She did not look back. The only sound was the rattle of chain and the scrape of boots on wet stone, as the woman who had nearly remade the court through elegant cruelty disappeared into the corridor in iron and silence. When the door closed, the vault exhaled. Rain battered the mountain above. The shattered seal glowed at Ophelia's feet like a wound opening into dawn. Magnus turned to her then, hands hovering as if asking from instinct what he would ask in words. "Can you stand?" Ophelia looked at the blood on her palm, at the witnesses who had finally heard her without interruption, at Mara newly freed and glaring down every elder in reach. The fear had not vanished. Neither had the grief. But something steadier now lived beside both. "Yes," she said, and meant it. Magnus's shoulders lowered by a fraction. the first visible release she had seen in him since the vault doors were barred. He turned to the witnesses while keeping one hand open near her, close enough to steady, far enough to remain a choice. Record everything before a single stone is moved. Sarah was already there with 2 scribes. She laid the intercepted courier draft, the forged seduction letters, and Guinevere's signet matrix on the nearest witness plinth, each item tagged in red wax. The master seal keeper ordered the altered northern rune cut clean from its channel and sealed in a glass reliquary under 3 signatures. The missing deputy's confession was taken twice, spoken and written, then bound with his thumb mark. Mara removed the cloth gag herself and, with no ceremony at all, snapped at an elder to hold still while she checked his pulse for shock. By the time the second moon bell sounded above the mountain, every report Magnus had ordered had begun returning. A runner arrived breathless from the rookery with Cold Harbor's reply. The late king's ledgers were intact, debts paid, and the insolvency rumor traced to copied pages commissioned through a Stoneheart intermediary. Another runner carried Nightshade's forced submission under Crown writ. Original altar records, including scratched-out addenda in Ryland's mother's hand and a steward's note that Winter Sanctuary had been knowingly denied in violation of old hold law. Ophelia watched those packets stack on black stone and felt an old terror lose its teeth. Evidence, once buried, now stood in the open, with names attached. When the scribes finished, the master seal keeper faced Magnus and Ophelia with his staff lowered. The seal is fractured but alive. Recognition has completed. Claiming must be mutual and witnessed, or the bond will keep surging without anchor. The chamber quieted again, though this silence held reverence rather than appetite. Magnus looked at her fully. "We do nothing you do not choose." Ophelia tasted rain in the air drifting through the cracked oculus and heard her own pulse answering his. "I choose." He stepped closer. "May I touch you?" "Yes." His fingers brushed her jaw first, giving her time to pull away. She did not. He slid his hand to the back of her neck, thumb resting just below her ear, and asked, voice roughened by restraint, "May I mark you, Ophelia Nightshade, in witness and vow?" Her throat tightened. Once she had stood on an altar where her name was used like an inconvenience. Here, it sounded like a promise. "Mark me," she whispered, "and hear me mark you in return." A low thrum built in her chest as he bent to the junction of her neck and shoulder, breath warm against skin gone cold from shock. The first touch of his mouth was almost reverent. The bite came sharp, bright, and clean. Pain flared, then changed. Heat rushed outward from the mark in widening rings, not consuming, not erasing, but opening locked places inside her. Memory surged through the bond, his voice reading sanctuary law by her bedside, his throat bared when she struck in panic, his fury when forged pages named her a liar, his hand hovering now because consent mattered more to him than urgency. She felt his side too, sudden and unguarded, nights of command taken alone, grief for a father he could not publicly mourn. The relentless discipline of a male taught that softness invited bloodshed. Underneath all of it, the steady truth that had terrified her from the first flare. He had seen her, not as symbol, not as strategy, but as mate. He drew back, forehead touching hers, breathing hard. Gold-silver light pulsed once beneath her skin where his mark settled into a crescent. His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her, though the witnesses heard enough to bow their heads. "Mine." She lifted shaking hands to his face, felt stubble and rain-damp skin, and the tension still braced through his jaw. "Yours," she answered, and then, because she had fought too hard for silence to reclaim her now, she guided him down. "Hold still," she murmured. He did, utterly. Ophelia turned to his neck and bit just above his collar, deliberate and sure. The second mark lit like struck metal. He made a broken sound, half pain, half relief, and his arms came around her only after she leaned in, enclosing without trapping. Through the completed bond came a flood so clear it left her trembling, trust offered and accepted, grief witnessed without shame, desire braided with devotion, power shared rather than seized. "Mate," he said against her hair. "Mate," she returned. The bond settled, not vanished, not dulled. Settled, like a storm choosing riverbanks after flooding a valley. The violent surges eased into a warm current between sternum and sternum, present with every breath. Around them, elders struck staffs once in acknowledgement. Mara wiped her eyes and pretended she had not. Sarah signed the final line in the vault register with ink-stained fingers that did not shake. Magnus pulled back just enough to search Ophelia's face. Any regret? None. He nodded as if receiving an oath in war. No more exile. She cupped his marked neck where her bite glowed, steady now. No more asking to be chosen. 3 days later, under a clear night sky and a moon bright enough to silver the battlements, the lower gate where Ophelia had been expelled became the site of restoration. The old trade arch had been stripped of debtor chains and hung with blue and gold banners. Fires burned in wide braziers along the road. Pack representatives filled the terraces in layered ranks, and for the first time Ophelia stood above them by right, not rumor. She wore no veil. The scar of the moonpin at her temple remained visible, and she left it uncovered. Sarah read the decrees aloud. Guinevere's exile confirmed at the border under oath brand and witness departure. Stoneheart assets transferred to war widow funds and winter stores. Lord Perrin's grain levy delivered in full at dawn. Elder Tomas's healer apprenticeships endowed and assigned by Mayera, now sworn as Crown Sanctuary Matron. The gate captain, promoted to Marshal of Winter Law after he broke the barred vault door, received his torque from Magnus with a soldier's embarrassed stiffness. Then came Nightshade's censure. Ophelia's father and Rylan were not granted speaking floor in person. Their written petitions for private reconciliation had arrived at noon and were entered into archive as received, unanswered by her choice. The officiant who had allowed the illegal expulsion lost rank and was remanded to border service under review. Rylan's mother's role in record suppression was appended to the judgment roll beside Guinevere's conspiracy file. No shouting, no spectacle. Just record, consequence, and a door closed with intent. At the center platform, Magnus took his seat on the right throne. A second seat, newly carved from the same mountain slab, stood to the left. He did not speak until Ophelia sat beside him and placed her seal ring, newly forged with the old Nightshade wolf restored, against the decree tablet. "From this night," he said, voice carrying across stone and snowmelt, "the crown governs in dual accord. No major decree stands without Alpha and Luna seal. Sanctuary petitions answer first to High Luna Ophelia Nightshade Wildfire." The crowd held one breath, then knelt in a wave that moved from front rank to gate. Ophelia rose before they finished, because this part had to be said standing. "Any rejected wolf, any human-born mate, any exile denied winter law may claim shelter here without barter of dignity. This gate is refuge now. If you arrive in storm, you are received before you are judged." A woman in travel leathers at the back began to cry openly. 2 young wolves beside her clasped hands and bowed their heads. Peace did not arrive as a miracle. It arrived as systems rewritten in plain sight. Signed ledgers, enforced clauses, shared authority. But when Magnus reached for Ophelia's hand before the assembled packs, there was nothing procedural about the way his thumb brushed her mark, or the way warmth answered along the bond like sunlight on stone. Later, when the fires burned lower and the last decree was stored, they stood together on the wall walk above the refuge gate, Mara and Sarah arguing amiably below about bed counts and grain bins, the mountain wind cold and clean around them. Magnus rested his brow to hers. We will have hard seasons, he said. We will, she agreed. And joy anyway. His smile was rare and unguarded. That is an order? That is policy, Alpha King. He laughed once, quiet, and drew her into his arms as the fortress settled behind them, no longer a place that had judged her first, but a home that now spoke in both their voices.